You made it to Chiro Hustle. Sit back and learn from the greatest influencers in the profession on the world's #1 chiropractic podcast. This episode is sponsored by Imaging Services, Chiro Health USA, Chiro Moguls, Chiropractic Rocks, True Weight Solutions, The 100-Year Lifestyle, Pure Chiro Notes, Titronics, Ultimate Entrepreneur Opportunity, BrainTap, Sherman College of Chiropractic, and Chiro Pro Accounting. Let's hustle.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 241 of the Chiro Hustle podcast. I am your co-host, Luke Millette. Here's your host, Jim Chester.
So today we had the opportunity of interviewing Dr. David Fletcher. And if you want to know more about advancement in technology, X-ray, HRV, and immunity, stay tuned. So today is a day you guys do not want to miss. It's episode 241 of the Chiro Hustle podcast, and we have a good friend of ours, David Fletcher, coming in from Toronto, Canada, and Luke and I are coming in from Grand Junction, Colorado. And if you guys would have caught what hit the cutting room floor before this interview started, you would probably listen to this 100 times over on double speed so you could digest it as quick as possible. But this is our second iteration of having you on our show as an official podcast. So we just want to welcome you to this episode with us.
Well, obviously, it's a red letter date on my calendar to jump into Chiro Hustle. And, you know, one of the things is that between those two episodes that we're doing right now, typically you and I and Luke have a chance to kind of stumble across one another because, you know, either I'm speaking or you're speaking, Jim, or, you know, we're collaborating in something, you know, in of all the sort of similar people we know. And I've kind of missed you guys. Like, you know, I'm kind of homebound here in Toronto, but tell me, are you still able to get out and shake hands and kiss babies these days?
Grand Junction's actually pretty open right now.
Good for you.
You can go into restaurants and sit down as long as, you know, you wear the mask while you walk in and leave. But yeah, people are out, people are doing things. I'm enjoying it.
That's good news. Well, you know, I don't think they can entrap our minds. So I hope that you've been mindful in developing Chiro Hustle, because I know we've used our time wisely on the CLA side to you know, to learn new strategies on how we can communicate and engage. And it's I suppose part of it's fun. I kind of miss seeing humans, though.
We miss you too.
Yeah.
And from my perspective, just because you opened up the can of worms, I do obey as much as possible.
Oh, yeah.
Because I know that there's a certain level of cultural shift going on.
Yep.
But I mean, if it's coming to go to the grocery store and they have a sign that says, "Hey, do this," I typically don't. And if they're like, "Hey, do this to come in," I'll do that. But on my exit, I typically don't. Like, I do just enough compliancy to appease the system, but I think that people have just become a little bit too coerced into like this whole thing of do it this way. And I don't know. I see what's happening in different parts of the world where, you know, they're harassing people for not, you know, covering their face. And I'm not the first to tell people I understand what's going on, but I understand what's going on is that when you take away people's ability to have their freedoms, it's a slippery slope. And I could get really deep on that rabbit hole with you, but I choose not to. But I love where we live just because it is very open, and our ability to move around freely is awesome. And we're so close to nature that I can go out there in 15 minutes and be away from people. And generally speaking, people that are out there doing the things I like to do are from the same mindset, and they're not masking their faces. And there's a lot of freedom.
Well, it's good to know. I mean, I think that we'll keep it before going down the bunny hole to say that we're probably all rebels that we walk the wrong way down an aisle in a grocery store.
I look forward to those opportunities.
There's definitely one thing I stopped paying attention to.
Yeah, no kidding. It's one of the most ludicrous concepts. But anyhow, so should we jump and think about chiropractic? What do you think? Is it worth talking about, or and break the monotony.
Well, 241 episodes into this this lovely podcast that Luke and I started 3 years ago, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about chiropractic today.
Yeah. Well, I think that I should actually have the headphones on and be interviewing you guys, because even though I am a chiropractor, I think you probably have met 240 interesting people's perspectives about what chiropractic is.
Well, my favorite part is the real first question of tell us your chiropractic story and what got you to become a chiropractor. That's really the essence of why this thing works, is because people are interested in other people's stories. And if we have a collection of those over the past couple of years, that means our story is pretty darn good too.
Oh yeah, no kidding. Well, mine, I've always, especially when I'm mentoring or meeting, people that are trying to choose chiropractic as a career path, or, people like yourselves who are non-chiropractors, but somehow drank the Kool-Aid and are, and it's in your DNA now. In terms of becoming a chiropractor, actually, getting the ticket that says, I don't know, you went through enough bullshit that you could actually, call yourself a chiropractor, doesn't make you a chiropractor. It just gives you a ticket to learn more, or fail. But, it was fascinating because I put more of an emphasis on what did you choose not to be versus why did you choose chiropractic? Because the definition for me was never about whether I was going to be in healthcare or not. I loved the knowledge base that was affiliated with it. I actually started my academic career as an engineer and then ended up in mathematics. And so I was deeply trained in logic. And when I made this shift over, and I was a little bit of an early starter. I started actual university when I was 16. And so when I was sort of going through these early iterations as to what I would choose to be, I had the sort of the spectrum of deciding on healthcare, which path I wanted to take. And it wasn't that I chose chiropractic as so much as I chose not to be an MD. I chose not to be a dentist. I chose not to be, somebody in the surgical fields or whatever else. I was drawn to chiropractic for its freedoms and for its uniqueness and for its outcomes. I was a chiropractic patient as a child. And I absolutely went into it with eyes wide open that it wasn't something other than chiropractic, which helped.
So last time we interviewed you, we were only on episode 74. So, about 160 episodes ago, I'm sure a lot has changed for you personally with CLA, your practice. Maybe you could tell us what has changed in the last 2 years, good or bad, what's improved, what's changed.
I think good. Like, let's be crystal clear here. I think good. When I took over CLA, which was now coming up in May of this year, 10 years ago, I had this singular vision, which was to take skill sets that I had learned over my first years in practice, and I'd been in practice by that time over 30 years, and I wanted to deliver the success stories that I had in practice, which were focused on being a chiropractor, not being in the business of chiropractic, pardon me. And so I started to realize that I had this opportunity on a world scale to take those same energies that were so good at doing things locally in a practice, but leverage the outreach that CLA had. And one of the things that attracted me to CLA, both when I was working with Pat and Chris, but also when I was organizing the new CLA, if you will, around things, was that it had always been based on purpose. It had always been a purposeful company. And so its purpose was unwavering, is that its focus was the subluxation and that its message was about empowering chiropractors to do their best. And I don't think that in the past 2 years, we've done anything other than accelerate that sort of wisdom path. And we really are at this stage peerless when it comes down to delivering these high level technologies for the right reasons. In other words, we didn't lose our way in the cutting room floor, as you were saying, Jim, earlier. We started talking about how we're not motivated to sell toasters. we can certainly sell pieces of hardware, but it has to be a good mix. You have to want to be a chiropractor. And I think that in the past 2 years, especially, we've refined ourselves through our software development and through our abilities to reach more and more and more chiropractors globally, to where we sort of stand, and I use the term peerless, we sort of stand alone, and have done very well in business, but at the same time have done very well to bring an interesting perspective to a very, very, very defined group. And I'll say that because especially in the past 2-3 years, our avatar of who we work with is not some struggling chiropractor who's waiting to, find the next nirvana moment and buy some, shiny bauble that's going to fix their world. We've really noticed that the people who are choosing to work with us as Chiropractic Leadership Alliance and as CLA are people that are striving to really accelerate. So our client base is highly successful, very young and motivated, typically within the first 5 to 7 years of practice, opening their new practices as a rule. It's more likely that they'll buy 2 systems out of the gate than one. Because they have this surge of necessity. And what's fascinating is that their focus is about enrichment of the family and not necessarily pathologizing through the back care model. They've really shifted to using chiropractic as we sort of always dreamed they would, which is to really engage humans.
Well, something you said there makes the door swing both ways. Technology and innovation and helping people. And I think that that's something that you're on the front lines of doing. And I know that this marries into old school technology, which is radiograph, which most people know as an X-ray. And when we talk about the analysis, detection, and the correction of vertebral subluxation, which you stand for, and what our show stands for, those things live side by side. When you can analyze somebody with an X-ray and when you can analyze somebody with your technology. Now, what's happening in this world of that marriage?
Well, I think that there has always been this intersectional moment between what is technology in any healthcare profession, but especially within chiropractic, and use the term innovative, Jim. And that's exactly why chiropractic has reached the levels that it has and stayed at the levels that it has, is that when it's a noted happenstance that X-ray, Wilhelm Röntgen discovered X-rays at the same time that D.D. Palmer discovered chiropractic in 1895. And so there was that intersectional moment where you could take a deep look at structural alignment, and not function, but structural alignment, and do a lot of deductive reasoning. And so the early models of chiropractic through the vertebral subluxation were based upon the technology ability to measure. And so if you take a look at the framing of the definition of the subluxation at that moment in time, all the way through to 1937, almost from the earliest of days, the model of the subluxation was that there had to be loss of continuity between the contiguous vertebra, which means the alignment had to be noticeably different. That there had to be an occlusion of the IVF, which means there had to be a physical impingement of the vertebra, so out of alignment and vertebra being out of place. So this is the vertebral part of the VS message. And finally, there had to be an interruption of the mental impulse, which was taking the physical to the metaphysical. And so you can sort of see that that intersectional moment between radiographs and the chiropractic modeling of what it would deliver as an outcome and otherwise. So much of the technique that was developed at that time was organized around correcting an identifiable subluxation through the technology of X-ray. So they would take a look at curvatures, they'd take a look at listings, and they would adjust to those. That's in the early days. That story, unfortunately, in around the 40s got co-opted, and they started to then change the concept of the subluxation to that of the fixation, and it became a spinal manipulative therapy approach. And the sort of interim modeling that was associated, back in towards the 70s, really took the history of that model of the subluxation, started to introduce the ologies, which was histopathology, pathology, neurology, myology, and the rest of it, and the 5 different ologies, and they can build this construct. But they took out the metaphysical. So they then took away from that. And there was this inductive reasoning that said if you have a system that no longer could support itself, then it was subluxated. The guys I interjected and came in contact with redefined that into what was called the 3D model, and it turned into a 4D model of subluxation. And that was Dr. Christopher Kent. And Christopher posited, and he was a Palmer professor, lecturer at that time, and he posited that we needed to have the focus on the neural discord that was changing structure. You can't unmarry structure and neurology and the function. But at the same time that Donnie Epstein was developing, his models that were affiliated with the adverse mechanical cord tension, Christopher was organizing around disafferentation, which was the 4th D, but he was talking about dyskinesia, dysautonomia, dyskinesis, and then we talked about disafferentation, which means that the whole goal was to then look at function and not have to deductively, look at whether or not structure was changing function, but to see functional shift. And so they developed what was at that time, what we know as the insight in these days, the technology that would then identify the functional loss of a subluxation, which was deeper than the structural loss. And so you could marry together the structural analysis, which could be associated with alignment in the spine or loss of mobility or even orthoneuro to some degree testing. But it was the loss of neural control and the as we then learned in the 80s, the concept of neuroplasticity no longer could be ignored. We then started to see that the loss and the change of the subluxation in the person was wrapped up in the truly metaphysical modeling, which is loss of adaptability. And so finally, we've come full circle, if you will, from structure to function to adaptability, metaphysics meeting physical world. And you have the perfect combination in 2021 of delivering objective data that can look at all, both structure, function, and consciousness, if you will, through adaptability. And it's a powerful intersectional moment.
Well, you said a lot of stuff there that basically gave me a PhD in chiropractic.
At least a history of it.
I feel a lot better suited going forward with our work. Thank you.
It's real. I promise you, it's real.
But the real fact of the matter is that I can just go back to like an analogous communication with you is taking X-ray away from the chiropractor is like taking a circular saw away from a carpenter.
Correct.
Or taking a measuring tool away from a chiropractor is the analogous of taking away a tool from a carpenter. Yes. So when we think about taking something away that was developed to actually advance this profession, it's really quite possibly an opportunity from people that are not appreciative of the care of health system that chiropractic delivers, looking to cause an extinction in this profession. And when you start taking away systems that work, I mean, just imagine if they put CLA to the chop block and said, hey, we're not going to allow this to be in the chiropractic offices anymore because there's no evidence that this is good for people. Yeah. Like that's a real conversation that needs to be discussed.
Definitely going to build a crooked house.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll jump in and say, you said something so powerful there about, taking a tool away. Well, even a carpenter has a lot of tools. Chiropractic doesn't have a lot of tools. It doesn't. This has been one of the most bizarre fallacies that and we should talk about this sort of movement that's afoot, at least in my country and in one of the jurisdictions of my country, to limit the use of X-ray, if not ban the use of X-ray in so many ways. And we should get to that in just a moment. But the truth of it is that this is the ludicrous nature of it, is that everybody knows that the chiropractic doesn't exist unless it makes functional change. And the mechanists who are not embracing the subluxation, they're embracing, if at most, the fixation. And that's only from T1 downwards, because of course, we're trained assassins if you should ever take a contact on the cervical spine. But the harsh reality is that their mode of analysis is motion palpation, which is so subjective, which we're sitting here talking about, an analysis of orthoneurotests, which are looking at best neurology from the IVF outward, which if you take a look at the studies that were published so long ago, and they looked at 62 different orthoneurotests, and only one passed the chi-square test, which was bimanual palpation, which is what chiropractors do best. Run your hand on both sides of the spine and see if it's accurate. The realities is that there's very few non-technological models that are a reliable, valid, and useful in measuring anything of the spine. And it isn't. And if you start taking X-ray away from chiropractors, you've removed literally the dominant rationale as to why a chiropractor can make a move towards observing either the decay of the subluxation, because the bone structure is the hardest tissue within our body. And I don't care whether you understand innate intelligence, or whether you want to talk about organizational intelligence or complex systems reorganizing to high levels of efficiency. However you want to define that, the realities is that if you have a snapshot of looking at the core structure of the human frame, which is an X-ray of the spine, and you detect that there are iterations of degenerative change, disease perhaps, that you're looking at malalignment issues that are going on, you have two choices. You have two choices when you take a look at an X-ray. You can look at and search for pathology, and that's called medicine, and that's called, and there is a rationale that the radiologists are really much better at detecting disease entities because that's what they look for all day long when using radiographs. But chiropractors are not radiologists. There's chiropractic radiologists, but they're not pathology-based, or shouldn't be pathology-based. They should be looking at the other side of that equation, which isn't to seek out with your lens on the pathology, but your lens on an intelligent design doing the best it can with what it has against an immovable and irrevocable force called gravity. Gravity ain't going away. And so if your structure isn't able to adapt, there's that adapt word, to the persistent force of gravity, you are going to observe shift. And if a chiropractor looks through the lens of a salutogenic modeling and starts to observe the fact that even the hardest tissues of the body are warping under the inability to adapt to the gravitational forces, then you have chiropractic perfectly defined. Now, a mechanist chiropractor who has a belief system that is still innately driven might make the mistake at that moment and put a heel lift in somebody who has a low or short left leg without necessarily detecting the primary subluxation. Because somewhere in that mix, I can promise you this, there is a primary subluxation that is interfering with the proper adaptation of that structure. And chiropractors need to, if we're going to call ourselves professionals, we need to have such a tool as X-ray to observe that. We've always blended the technology of CLA with X-ray. It's never been an A or B. Many people choose not to use it as a primary and use the CLA equipment only. And I'm all over that if that's what they want, but don't dismiss structure. Ever.
Well, thank you for going to bat with that question and, helping people at least articulate your position with why chiropractors should continue having access to and the liberty as a professional and as a doctor, to be able to have somebody that comes in under their care, which is a care of health system. Chiropractic is a care of health system. It's not a healthcare system.
Yes.
So it's a hands-on profession that needs to have the best ability to do a diagnosis and to do a correction. And if you take that tool away, it's like saying, hey, we don't have flashlights anymore. You guys are just going to have to walk around at night without flashlights. Cool. It's not okay.
Not cool.
And, something that you said there, I want your perspective on this one, because this interview is really not scripted. And
No.
I want your perspective on this one. You said something there about medicine.
Yep.
I'm in all types of different groups all across the world, and I see chiropractors coming out there saying that it's chiropractic medicine. Like, does that just grind the gears of somebody that's been around in the profession for 41 years? Is chiropractic really a medicine?
No, it's the antithesis of medicine, and the point of it is that I am so not against medicine. I'm against chiropractic medicine because that is an oxymoron. Is that the only reason chiropractic exists is not to be antagonistic to medicine, but to alleviate the load on medicine by giving people the opportunity to not get sick so they don't end up there. And if there's anything we've learned from this pandemic, is that the goal in public health, if we can say this, in terms of it, which was interestingly, in the very early days as to why we would give up our civil liberties, it was all for one and one for all. And that was that there was a limited resource called medical beds, and that the very sick would need the medical beds. And the rest of us said, okay, you know what? We live in a society where we care about the vulnerable and whoever it is. So we're going to play the game with you and help take the load off and flatten the curve. Remember when the early days of this whole thing was do what you can to flatten the curve. It wasn't beat the virus because the virus wasn't there. It was about give medicine the tools that they need to keep the very sick people alive. Was that not it? That to me is the most elegant definition of why medicine exists. That's why they should be there. I want those guys. Like, honest to God, if things go wrong, whether it's with a pandemic or whatever else, I don't have the answers that they have. They have a machine that knows shit that I don't know, right? But nobody knows chiropractic like me, or the Chiro Hustle, or the people that are there. So don't confuse chiropractic and medicine at any day. But that doesn't mean I don't like medicine. It just means medicine is misinformed as to what chiropractic is. So it's never looking backwards. They're never going to say, oh, I'm a medical chiropractor. That's not going to happen. It's the trouble with that oxymoron. It's for very confused chiropractors who wish they'd have done what I did 40 plus years ago, which was make a distinctive choice that I didn't want medicine, that I wanted to be a chiropractor. And unfortunately, what we're seeing there are people that want to be in medicine, but don't want to be a chiropractor.
Yeah, I think it's an identity crisis within the profession that wants to be accepted by a larger funding association rather than going out there and grassroots building a clinic for themselves and being happy with success that it takes to build that life for themselves. And I look at it as a sequencing thing. One of my mentors told me, Jim, you can't go out of sequence. Yeah. If you go out of sequence, you have to go back and redo those parts. And if you go back and redo those parts, it's doing the work twice or three times. Yep. So we just have to really sequence this out the right way to where the future of chiropractic doesn't go back and have to redo parts. And if we have to go back and do our parts, it's like if you go to the national boards and you go to take that test and you don't pass part 3, guess what? You go back in sequence and you take that part again. And that's the part that's really like we have to come down to is we can't go out of sequence with identity. And chiropractors can't go out of sequence. Otherwise, we'll have to go back and redo that. So we can stop this, this deterioration of identity right now and go back to say, hey, just for clarity, you're a chiropractor and you're a chiropractor and you're a chiropractor. If you want to go do the other thing, go get the other licensing and go do the other thing. But don't come and infiltrate, I'm a chiropractor, I'm a chiropractor, I'm a chiropractor with another agenda and try to switch the game for all the chiropractors. That's where I see the identity thing as being so divisive right now that we need to go back to the explanation to the profession and saying, hey, you're a chiropractor, you need these tools, you do this thing. Hey, go out there and serve. But if you do it this way, you're not a chiropractor anymore. So don't try to manipulate chiropractic with your agenda based on taking money from another department that's not chiropractic related.
Well said. And here's the great news. First off, wise mentor to talk to you about sequencing. The second part of that is, here's the great news. And one of the joys that I've had with chiropractic, and it's not to confuse simplicity with complexity, because chiropractic exists as a profession because it has crafted the modeling on a simplistic outcome, but it sits on the far side of complexity. It's not lost to that. And so one of the great things about sequencing towards this uber ease of being a chiropractor, which is what the whole metaphor of what BJ was doing when he was taking the IO principle and putting it into an upper cervical. He was doing this modeling to say, I don't even have to look at all the different influences of the segments of the spine. I'm going to do one adjustment that's going to give us the biggest bang for the buck. And that's where he crafted the HIO principles. And it wasn't lost on him that it, just because it was, next to the brainstem, that it was there. It was the association of the vagal tone and of the ability of this neural creature to be engaged with a chiropractic adjustment. It wasn't about, hammering on a spine. It was this elegant, surgery without the knives that was associated with, yes, the correction and to some degree the removal of a vertebral subluxation. But it's what Stevenson said, is that the intent of the adjustment was not about realigning the spine. And in fact, I should pull out a quote for you from BJ 1931 Lyceum, and I'll paraphrase it, but he said, you can take a look at spinographs, and you can take a look at other things that are going to show you alignments of the spine, and that's all they do. They do not detect the vertebral subluxation. The realities is that a chiropractor should not get confused between realigning the spine and giving an adjustment to do what Stevenson said, which was the ultimate outcome of this, which was to simply arouse innate. And so if you take a look at the sequencing, and you have structure with immutable forces that we described, like electromagnetism and the ability of gravity to work with you, and strong and weak nuclear forces, the realities those aren't going away. We choose, or whatever, to live on planet Earth. Those are forces of planet Earth. And so we have built through our genomes this ability to adapt to gravity, and it's called a spine, and we're bipeds instead of quadrupeds now, and we can move with it. And we have a specific part of our nervous system which is dedicated 100% to the ability of organizing around gravity. And that's called your motor nervous system. And it takes up a good chunk of your brain, and it demands a tremendous amount of energy and management to manage gravity. Sperry said that it takes up to 90% of your energetic modeling to live and function peaceably within gravity. And so it's a very, very important part to have this structural neural functional control mechanisms. But we still have to be creative to be human beings. And so we still need to engage our universe, and we still need to operate and digest food and fuel and everything else and have an autonomic function that goes along with it. And then we need to tie all of that together and become emotional beings. And this is the joy. So that's the big construct behind all of this. But here's the sequencing that you said, Jim. It's so freaking easy. And it starts out with the decision, A or B. It's a binary decision. Am I going to embrace a vitalistic perspective with vitalistic driven outcomes? Or am I going to look at a pathology-based model and look and search for disease versus look for perfection? That's all you have to do. Is when you meet a patient, like when I would meet a patient, I would let them speak and have their conversation. And I would get to the point where they had drained out whatever their perspective was on their health or whatever it was, lack of health. And I would say, it surprises me that something as intelligent as your body didn't get it right. It couldn't turn this back on again. My role as a chiropractor is to start there and see if I can find out where the interference is to turn your body back on again so it can do what it was designed to do. It was as simple as that. Vitalism versus mechanism. The second is to embrace functional organizational behaviors. So you have to have a triune of life in your modeling, which says that I have to have force, matter, and intelligence all coming together. And so I'm going to build a construct under how I'm going to analyze force through neurology, matter through structure, and intelligence in looking at adaptability. And finally, I'm going to find out where you sit in this vitalistic quotient. Are you moving to, this is Bruce Lipton, am I moving towards a more coherent state, or am I locked in an incoherent state and succumbing to the forces that we talked about of the gravitational fields and otherwise that are in there? Because if I can move myself to be in harmony and be at ease and be more coherent, then guess what happens? Intelligence takes over. I'm not wasting energy, and boom, I can express myself as a human being. That is a 3-step sequence, Jim, that anybody can do. And the intervention in there is tie together man the physical, Dede, 1904, man the physical with man the spiritual, and make it work with the adjustment.
You made it to Chiro Hustle. Sit back and learn from the greatest influencers in the profession on the world's #1 chiropractic podcast. This episode is sponsored by Imaging Services, Chiro Health USA, Chiro Moguls, Chiropractic Rocks, True Weight Solutions, The 100-Year Lifestyle, Pure Chiro Notes, Titronics, Ultimate Entrepreneur Opportunity, Brain Tap, Sherman College of Chiropractic, and Chiro Pro Accounting. Let's hustle.
Something I'm very curious about, who are some of your mentors? Who are some of the people in your life who've shaped you to be the person you are today? And they can be chiropractic or non-chiropractors. They could be living or passed on.
And before you say that, David, I look at you as one of my mentors. So thank you.
Oh, Jim, thank you.
Thank you for showing up the way that you always do and supporting the beautiful profession of chiropractic the way that you do for the reasons that you do it for. So with that being said, I since day one I met you, the sound bites that we put into our first film with you blew my mind with the character that you became when I first met you. And then I've been able to see the evolution of you over the past couple of years as well. And I couldn't be more inclined to tell the world out there that listens to this episode, David Fletcher understands this profession so darn well. And I'm just pleased to have you on this episode with us today.
Oh, you're a good man. And well, you and Luke have done nothing but give up a massive portion of your life and your resources to stand shoulder to shoulder with all of us. And, I don't see myself as a leader in a thought model. I know that my voice is heard. I get that, but I'm still, and the reason I say that is that I am still so invested in learning. I appreciate that I can be a voice that is heard, but I feel I've got so much more to do and learn about what chiropractic is and how it ties together, which is obviously something in my ageism that allows me to think of doing that for the rest of my life. It's so exciting. So I've had the joy and pleasure of standing on the stage, calling people that are sort of iconic in this profession my friends. And there are people that I could reach out to and have conversations with. And so what I don't want to do when you ask me this question, Luke, is I don't want to come across as if it's name dropping, because that would be not what I was. I was lucky enough. I was open enough, and I was lucky enough to be this empty vessel. And so if I was like, let me give you one quick sort of story about what was this driving force. There was when I didn't get to know Jim Parker, but I knew Parker programs. They had this sort of open mic program on Wednesday night. Yeah, Wednesday night before Parker's happened. Parker's were scheduled for 6 times yearly. And so you would go with the intention of going to a Parker program to learn, meet your pals, do whatever it was. But one of the things is they had a guy whose name was Art Aston. And Art Aston on Wednesday ran what was the equivalent of an open mic. And if you ever wanted to be a speaker at Parker, which was, by the way, the only game in town, meaning there weren't coaches, there weren't anything else. Parker was Parker was Parker. DE and Life wasn't even there at this time. It was just starting, so there was Life Parker, Life DE and Parker eventually. And so I remember thinking, wow, I'd love to try and be a Parker speaker at some time. So I would go on Wednesdays and wait my turn and do an open mic about whatever it was and what have you. And, the answer to that was that for years and years, I was a Parker speaker. And, there was so I got to meet some of my greatest mentors. A man who put me under his wing and who I became very close with in the early days was John DeMartini. And John and I carved a path. I was probably one of his very first students at his own programs. And John and I traveled together, and we became very close. And John, I was just a sponge to what John was learning and had learned at that time. But it was always wonderful to meet up with him. Another mentor was who really set me in the course of developing efficiencies out of the world was he was a product of the Ward Landis system, which again was Parker at that time, and his name was James Carter. And James Carter was an Australian who set up a coaching consulting program at that time in Toronto, and a group of us joined that. And for many years, I helped run that program. And James was a visionary in understanding chiropractic, but also developing strategic models so that you could become efficient and not lose your way. Jim is still alive, so I don't want to sound like it was then and now, but he was the most integral. The guy breathed integrity. It was so fulfilling to be around him. Pat and Chris, Pat Gentempo and Christopher Kent, obviously for what they began in my career and put me on the path of CLA. And all the people that I met through those were there. Probably one of my most influential collaborators was Sigafus. Sig and I toured together a long time, and there was nothing. Sig was a complex man, but at the same time, he was that simplistic model. Nothing could move him from the point. There was nothing that could move him off of chiropractic, and all of us have our flaws, but he was a beautiful man, and so I cherish and relish the opportunity to have crafted the message build that I put out there through what are the greats, of our profession.
Just out of curiosity, do you have any non-chiropractic heroes?
Yeah, you know what? Honestly, Steve Jobs is one of them that comes to mind, and it isn't just because I'm drawn to technology. I suppose that the modern day Steve Jobs would be Elon Musk-ish. Where there's this innovation, and we began on the cutting room floor of this particular one. I sort of said, well, who are the innovators in our profession? And when I mean the innovators, I'm talking about who's going to be the Elon Musk, because Elon Musk is, or a Steve Jobs didn't set out to do what they're doing. Elon Musk didn't go into car manufacturing to become Tesla. He became, a visionary of energy management, and he thought, I can build a battery that can make the world use less energy the way we do, so I'll put it in a car and I'll go to the moon. And Steve Jobs did the same thing. As he said, I'm going to bring industrial design to computing, and it's going to be beautiful. And people are going to fall in love with technology because of its beauty and then its efficiency. And that's exactly what Apple was able to do. And so I look at those people and their vision, and I'm waiting to see where chiropractic's visionary comes from, because it has to be on the far side of that complexity to make it real to me anyways.
Well, it sends a visceral effect to me. I feel like the hair on my arm standing up, and I think you're spot on with your your idea around who's going to come into this and actually take that lead. And I think that you mentioned Jobs and Musk, and those guys didn't do it by themselves. They were the figure.
No.
They had tons of people behind them supporting their initiatives that believed in them just as much as they believed in their own visions. So I really believe that it's going to take the old saying is it takes a village to raise a kid. Well, it's going to take a profession to rise that leader. And that's where the congruency comes back into play is the profession has to say, I don't care what acronym is behind the groups that I give my money to. I want to see the profession go the right direction. And this is the person and this is the initiative that's going to be laid out. And it's going to be for the right reasons. And I think that that's what we're talking about as an industry liaison also, but also somebody that is a champion for the message and the cause. And I think that that's what the chiropractic profession has to come full circle on is who is that disruptor, if you will, or who is that innovator, if you will.
And are they necessarily a chiropractor?
Yes. And who is it going to come from? So I think that a lot of it gets done with support, and that has to be done by the elders. The elders have to say, hey, this is the one. We have to support this Superman or this Superwoman and help them become the super chiropractic advocate or help them become the super chiropractic visionary. And I think that person's out there. It has to be determined by the elders, and it's not a hey, I'm just going to come in here and become a radical rebel and take over chiropractic, because that will never happen. But I think we have to erase the acronyms from who people support themselves through and call it chiropractic again.
Yeah, I think that we have to get it straight as to where, and maybe we have to do, what all civil war is all about is find out who's got the stronger, desire. But, at some point, and this goes back, straights mixers all the way back to the beginning of time into the chiropractic model. There's always been this schism or this dichotomy between what we are and what we aren't. And it's that vitalism versus mechanism modeling. And the weirdest part about this is, guys, is that you can have it all. You don't have to decide if you're A or B. And it's that whole idea of if you stay in your lane and you don't want to be medicine and you can be chiropractic, you can have it all. There's a world of consumers out there that want chiropractors. They don't want subsets of medicine. I mean, if you don't want to go to a chiropractor, don't go. It's not like we do it. But my experience is, and again, if you can take a look at sort of what COVID shone a light on, more than anything, it shone a light on the idea of medicine not having the tools or the skills to embrace humanness in people. They're great at sticking a tube down and venting somebody if you can't breathe, but that's not life. That's survival. We're talking about those people who are going to strive to thrive. And I think that when you take a look at it, also, if I could add one more sort of non-chiropractic mentor that drives the message build home. I think that you take a look at somebody like Joseph Campbell, who is a mythologist, and you take a look at the modeling of intentionality. I think that those are amazing models. But Maslow's hierarchy, again, going back to very simple but proven models of looking at stratification within decision-making, but which is society. If you take a look at Maslow's hierarchy, medicine is well positioned to work with the bottom rungs. Those are people that are not self-actualized, that are victims of either poverty, decision-making. It's terrible, to live in this lower rung of where it's at. And I'm not suggesting for a moment that chiropractic shouldn't jump down there, meaning it has so much to help people survive. But you have to be able to be fed and be able to think and not be full of disease before you get the most out of chiropractic. And I know I'm going to step on some toes here because anybody and everybody can be adjusted. But I'm talking about getting sequential adjustments and building rhythms and doing whatever. And unless there's somebody who's down in the soup kitchens in the homeless group that's going in there, twice daily and 3 times a week to give those adjustments to the homeless and whatever else. That realm, unfortunately, falls to this to the most vulnerable get adjusted, infrequently. But the value of chiropractic is based upon getting out of there and getting into those middle zones so that you can start to experience life. And so you can start to experience what it's like to have that coherence. You have to have a little bit of it. And I'm not talking just simply socioeconomic, but you got to pay for chiropractic at this stage, which means you have to have the means to keep going and get the most out of it. So I think that when you look at the stratification of it all and you start to take a look at why chiropractic is where it is, it's never a subset of medicine. It just reaches a different dynamic of the stratification of society. And at least that's how it's being programmed to be there, right? And that's unfortunate because because part of this whole getting it together is to come to realize that communities like dentistry and like medicine, which are pathology based primarily, to some degree prevention is about as good as you can take medicine and dentistry. They've been made publicly available so that they can be distributed down all the way through, to some degree, the Maslow's hierarchy. And in fact, they don't care about the upper echelons of the self-actualized because those people either can afford it or they just move on with making the decisions outside of society. But chiropractic hasn't caught the attention of it being this life-saving event. It's really perfectly positioned to be mid-range. And we have to decide if that's okay with us as a profession, because right now, the detractors of vitalism say very clearly that they want to jump down into the lower rungs of Maslow's hierarchy. And because they define back pain as the definition of chiropractic and not the subluxation and vitalism, they go back and say, we've got a better tool in our box called chiropractic that can manage back pain better than you guys know how to. And truthfully, that's just bullshit.
Well, I look at it this way, David. It's like saying, hey, you have a 12-year-old that wrote their book report for their class, and we're going to believe in that. And, and because they did the research and they wrote a book report, or they wrote a little essay, that's what we believe in. And I think that that's the way that we're going with saying, hey, chiropractors are mechanistic and all they do is take care of back pain and neck pain and headaches. Because a 12-year-old wrote that in a book report or their essay. And I think that that's what we've digressed to, is some people that have done some study that has nothing to do with chiropractic, but it has something to do with the medical aspect of the industry. And before I get to that part of it, you have ignited me with this conversation today. And I've just been holding back so much of what I wanted to talk to you about, because your ability and your eloquence to talk about the profession at the level that you do, everybody needs that. But I've also seen to the fact that chiropractors have been lambasted for saying that chiropractic has an effect on the immune system.
Right.
And I think that that's one of those storylines that needs to be discussed too in this 9-round fight, is what's going on there, and why are chiropractors digressing to say we don't have an impact, or I don't have the research, or yeah, you guys are right and I'm going to shut up, and we don't have an effect on that part of the human dynamic.
There's so much at stake when we take our foot off the pedal and say we don't do immunity well, if you will say, and because anecdotally, and I say that anecdotally without judgment, we know that when you adjust the human genome changes, let alone the immune structures and immune systems, we know that that immunity is defined as circulating neurology. And when you bring greater coherence into the neural communication within the body, immunity being a subset of all of the functional parts of neurology has to improve. when you take core neurology and make it more coherent, everything improves, including autonomicity, including the ability of the motoricity of the person to do, and immunity improves as well. The trouble with it is that and I sit as a board member on the ASRF, and the problem with all the funding and all the direction that has gone on is that case studies have been the anecdotal outcomes of observing immunity. And it's not that that's true, because there is research that indicates what it is that the people who want to stop us from having a say in this concept of immunity are those who want pathology and immunity to be together. What we need to do, and this is my humble opinion, but I think it's correct for where chiropractic needs to do it, is not define in the same way, chiropractic fixes back pain. Chiropractic improves immunity. Chiropractic, allows earaches to go away. Those things happen. I know they do because I adjust people, and that happens. I've made more people pregnant without ever impregnating them, than humanly possible. The realities is that the magic is that it makes people more adaptable. And that's what we should be focusing on, is striving to show that humans become more adaptable when well adjusted, and everything else follows. And you can take the metaphysical religiosity out of chiropractic by using the concept of adaptability. You don't have to tie it to bone out, pinches nerve, causes problem in a Merrick system and everything else. It's a global sense of change. And it's so easy to measure, because that's what I do and we do every day with technology, is that if we want to take a look globally at what's going on with the global adaptive controls in someone, you don't have to research chiropractic to figure it out. You can go out and say heart rate variability is a proven methodology under which people become, with low HRV, they are less adaptable. That is in the science. And in the science as well is the idea that if they have limited HRV, then we know with this low adaptability that their definition of immune responsiveness is measurably poor. Okay, so that's non-chiropractic, that's medical. HRV, high-low, immunity, high-low, pro-inflammatory responsiveness, high-low, directly associated with vagal tonicity that's controlling heart rate variability. Along come Dave Russell and Amy Haas. Okay, and they were using my technology, but Dave was one of my closest friends, God rest him, and Amy, who I've come to know over the years, is there. And they do a pilot study and publish a simple cohort of 9 chiropractic follow-through patients, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. And they go through it all, and every one of the 9 that are published, so that when they adjust them under a vertebral subluxation methodology, through analysis and adjustment and correction, that their HRV grossly improves. Okay? You don't have to be this genius that ties together HRV with immunity. It's proven already. Now, we should spend the money, and we should go to the world and say, when we adjust somebody, their neutrophils improve, or their lymphocytes become more measurably improvable. But that's stage 2. Stage 1 has already been done. Does chiropractic influence adaptability through their ergo? That means that we improve immunity and all other things? Yes. And you should be comfortable to stand on that. That's my opinion.
Well, I from a doctor's perspective and from a journalistic perspective, your doctor perspective is definitely what we need to shine the spotlight on. And we need to lean on you for 40 plus years of experience as a chiropractor. And you're from the reckoning of your degree to the reckoning of your influences to the reckoning of where you're still excited to keep learning. And I think that we have to, really, soak this interview in, because there's parts that you shared about why there's necessity for X-ray, why there's necessity for a bigger conversation around immunity with the chiropractic adjustment. Mm-hmm. And if we didn't talk about anything else and we just talked about those two things today, I believe that our time today would help more people understand why chiropractic is a necessity in all communities and why we need to support chiropractic for the sake of chiropractic. And that whatever, rabbit trail you go down with your group or your coach or your belief system around business, that we have to come back to the fundamentals. And the teams that win the big game do the fundamentals well. They block and tackle. They run simple plays. And that if we get our playbook down and we can learn how to block and tackle better as a profession, then we can win the big game. And I really believe that the big game is ready for chiropractors to step into, because they've been blocking and tackling for a long time and learning the playbook when it comes to technique, when it comes to degree. And if we could marry that together with understanding that the advancements that are yet to be made are still built on the foundation of the philosophy, science, and art of chiropractic. And we can't throw the old saying is you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, and you can't throw chiropractic out for the advancement either. Like, you still have to keep chiropractic at the core of this whole thing. And what you've said today was so integral for the neophyte all the way to the person that's running legislation. Like, I think that if we could get this conversation to more people that are decision makers within the health model, they would be woke. Like, they would wake the hell up and they would say, wow, I wasn't really aware of what chiropractic really did. I wasn't really aware of how they innovated with time. I wasn't really aware of HRV in chiropractic. I really wasn't aware of much of what Dr. David Fletcher shared with me today, because nobody really asks people to talk on these topics. So I think what we are doing with technology and media is we're innovating this conversation. And we're bringing a lot of conversations like this consistently to the market for not only the layperson, but for the other medical professionals to say, wow, I didn't know any of that stuff about chiropractic. And the reason that we got into where we are today is because I worked in a chiropractic office, David, and I was doing patient testimonials, and I realized it was changing people's lives.
Oh, yeah.
There's a bigger play out there. How can we get this message to mainstream? And that's why Luke and I created our first film when we first met you. I was like, this is a bigger play because more people need to know about chiropractic. And then I realized the fundamentals of the profession were based on real foundation. And I was like, I can buy into this because I believe in it 100% of the time. And that's really what it took for me to dedicate, like you said earlier, my time and interest and dedication to something selflessly, because I believe that this is the answer. And if I didn't believe it was the answer, I would have checked out a long time ago.
Yeah, I think that, in sort of parting notes as we, I'm sure wind our time up, is that especially if you use the term neophyte, if you're new, or you feel like you're new or ready for a new voice that goes along with it, it all begins with this idea that you have to be incredibly thankful, whether you know it or not. Yeah, you may be struggling anything else. You have to be remarkably thankful that chiropractic caught your attention to the degree that you chose it as a life path, or at least like to learn it. I'm in awe of being able to imagine that I can change people's lives with an adjustment. I dedicated a tremendous part of my early practice life to refine my skill, to refine my art of being a chiropractor, not because it was like, if I was going to not be a surgeon, and we began that as sort of the thing, like those surgeons, a cardiothoracic surgeon is going to go at least 16 years in training to do it. And I'm in awe of what their skill sets can be. I mean, cracking a chest and rerouting arteries and stuff like that. That's kind of bizarre stuff. And I knew that I was that good that I could have been one of those. And it was my responsibility to be that good in the craft that I had chosen, which is chiropractic. And so I've said, and I have to again really watch this, but I want our listeners, or at least to hear this through the lens what it is. But let me share this with you, is that I got to a point which was my mantra, or what was driving me in there, to be able to say, you would love to be adjusted by me. And I mean that with the greatest sincerity. And I remember saying that. I had the guts to say it. I was speaking in front of about 2,600 people. And I was a keynote speaker at this program. And I said, here's the bottom line, is that you have to be comfortable enough in your own skin as a chiropractor to stand like I'm going to stand right here in front of all of you and tell you that you would love to be adjusted by me. And you have to know that that's not your ego saying, I'm better than anyone else. It means that I love you so much that I've learned to do it that well. That's what I would like people to hear from me.
Well, David, we are at the end of our time, but before we all jump, give us some resources or websites. Where can people go to learn more about you or CLA?
I spend my life like you guys do with Chiro Hustle, is that it almost is my definition. And hopefully if people go to Insight CLA, that Insight is our technology, CLA.com. So insightcla.com, they'll have a wonderful opportunity to learn about myself and learn about us if they just scroll through the website. Go into the blogs, go into that. There's tons of resources for learning about technology and chiropractic and HRV and things that we've been talking about today. And listen, for some people, if you're interested enough to figure out if you're a good fit for technology that's going to bring the best out of you, at the end of Insight CLA, just put the slash and put PSA behind that. So Insight CLA /PSA, and PSA stands for Practice Survey Assessment. And we built this company on what we refer to as the attraction principle. Our goal is obviously to put messages in front of you, like we're doing right now with Jim and Luke. But the realities is that it only works if it's a right fit and it's attraction. And so when we put you into a PSA, it's a non-sales model. It's about learning who you are and about having a discussion with you to see if you're on the right path as to what it is and whether our match could be something that would fit for you guys. Anyhow, it's fun. It's fun to sort of be in that position. And so if anybody's interested in learning more about who we are and whatever else, try that out.
Well, David, it's been a pleasure having you on the show again. We didn't get through many of our questions, so we might have to have you back for part 3, which will be a first.
Well, that'd be amazing. And I'm honored to be number 241 and number 74. You have no idea what that means to me. So thank you.
Oh, we always have fun talking with you, and we always learn a whole hell of a lot when you come on.
It's my pleasure.
Well, we'll close out today. And if people want to learn how to create a podcast show just like us, we have created a nuts and bolts approach from A through Z to teach people how to do that. If they go over to chirohustlemasterclass.com, they can learn how to do an upstart podcast and get their dissemination of information out to their local communities. We teach people how to do solo casts or interview style and all the resources and build out that they need to actually produce. So Luke and I have put that as a labor of love to help elevate the messaging of chiropractic, but it's for everyone. So if you have anybody that wants to learn how to do podcasting, please trust us to be able to help them. So with that being said, David, we love and appreciate you.
We love and appreciate you too. And do that podcast. A masterclass. You guys are masterful at this, and it shows up in how you get the most out of your guests. So thank you for inviting me.
Until next time, my friend.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to Chiro Hustle. Don't forget to subscribe and check back next week to continue hustling.